It's Linnell Grunman again, and I'm here with a very special guest, our Senator Vinny DiMacedo. Thank you so much for coming to have another conversation about the potential of legalizing marijuana for recreational purposes. That's a ballot question this year. So the senator has done an enormous amount of work on this issue, and he and I are working together quite a lot on this, and I'm enjoying it. We're going to get right started. We're going to get started with asking Vinny, how did this become one of your top issues?
Well, Nell, first, thank you for having me on your show. It's been a pleasure working with you and learning about something that, let's face it, most of us probably never paid too much attention to this issue. But how did Vinny get involved?
How did Vinny get involved?
What happened was about, anecdotally, I thought, it's probably not a good idea. I heard about the fact that we've always heard that the industry, the first thing they do was, the decriminalizing, then it's the medical marijuana. 4 years later, then it will be the total total legalization of it. So we always kind of knew that was the pattern. And yet the first two, I didn't really have overly strong opinions of. But what happened was when I knew this was coming up, I was thinking, wow, are we ready to be like, Colorado? Well, funny enough, the Senate president had put together a group of legislators or senators and offered them, would anybody be interested in going to Colorado to see what's actually happening in Colorado and to see if this thing passes, what should we do as a group? And of course, my first reaction was, I don't know if I want to go, because then people are going to be like, oh, look at a little junket going to Colorado, all of the things that you were, you were concerned about the public perception.
Sure.
And in fairness, I took some beating on local radio in regards to that. That being said, best thing I ever did, because I really got to dig down into what this ballot question means. This is a 24-page piece of legislation.
Right.
And
it's public policy. I think people really forget that.
Yes.
That they're not just voting on an opinion, they're voting on, and in our case, extremely detailed public policy.
And you say public policy, it's a great point. This ballot question was written by the industry, for the industry, for the benefit of the industry. So let's face it.
And we're not against capitalism.
Listen,
our form of
I
economics.
understand.
Yeah.
But what happens in a legislative process, and that's why we have legislature, is that when you do these things because you want the debate to happen. There was no debate. This was the ballot question that they put in that was good for them. They put it in there. They've brought in millions of dollars from outside of the state to push this, and people don't know how significant this is. This isn't just about legalizing marijuana. This is about creating an entirely commercial industry.
And the impact of creating that industry on our communities, our tax dollars, and you and I both being involved in public policies, this is an area where people don't have that kind of in-house knowledge. The economic impact of this, there was actually an excellent letter in the Cape Cod Times this morning. I don't know if you saw it. I'm not going to read it, but everybody should look at it because it is actually entitled "Don't Base Our Economy on Marijuana Addiction," and it's purely from the economic impact, which goes to the public policy piece. So we're not just talking about the freedom to smoke marijuana anywhere you want. Can you give us a broad overview of the public policy, kind of the details of this, and then I want to talk about some specifics.
There are three major issues that I think that people should be concerned about. The first one is the high-potency edibles. In Colorado, there was actually, after the whole thing passed, there was a group of people who said, okay, we know it's here, but we want to limit the edibles to 15 to 16% THC content. Again, just so reference that, back in the day, in the 60s and 70s and 80s.
My generation.
Exactly, my generation as well. And it was 2.5% THC.
Right.
That's what you would get from a joint. So today, the marijuana joints are somewhere in the vicinity of 16 to 18% THC, far more potent. However, the edibles, these highly potent edibles, are 30 to 40% THC. There was a group that tried to make it so it couldn't be higher than 16% THC. The industry went crazy. They fought it, and they were successful in not allowing a limitation.
And this was in Colorado, correct?
This is in Colorado.
And this relates to our ballot question too, because the ballot question in Massachusetts, like Colorado and the other two states and the District of Columbia, provide a commission be brought into working order, but that commission for any potential legal or legislation that comes up about it, but that commission is made up primarily of marijuana industries, which was the case in industry members. So that was the case in Colorado. And I know I heard one of the pro people talk about, well, there'll be a commission and they can up the tax rates and they can take care of all these problems. But if, as you just said, that commission is from the industry and they're obligated to look out for their industry, where are we?
Again, you have that advisory commission that will be set up in place. And the way the industry, what they say is that it's going to be appointed by the governor, but it's 59 of them. Of the 15, 9 of them, it's an advisory board, has to be from the industry. Then the treasurer has a 3-member board. The 3-member board is the final say. They're the ones that are deciding. So once you voted, you've allowed this decision to be made by 3 people who you have no idea are.
Right.
And
right.
that's a legitimate concern.
Very much
and
so.
It is all of these issues. So when we talk about the highly edible, that's one issue. The second one that there is no answer to, which is the drugged driving or stoned driving.
Mm-hmm.
People driving down the road high on, marijuana and, very potent marijuana. What happens to them? We know that we have no test to test for it, like we do the per se law with a .08. You blow into a breathalyzer, you lose your license. That's not going to happen. Because you have to take a blood test. After the blood test, they have to go through this process.
Right.
And of course, the argument when it gets to court is, guess what? I didn't have, when I wasn't high at the time, they know that THC stays in your system for 30 days. Mm-hmm. So in actuality, we won't get the conviction. So people would be more apt to drive high because they know there aren't going to be the consequences of you like you would if you were driving drunk. And then lastly is local control. And then you have been in local government for many years. Losing local control to an industry, and proponents will say we have local control. You have local control. The reality is you actually have to go to the voters. The voters have to, in a election cycle, a statewide election, have to take the issue up. Having people, in your community, your board of selectmen or your town manager, they don't have the control, and they did that purposely. In Colorado, you had to opt in to allowing marijuana facilities coming into your. This one is you have to opt out. You literally have to opt out. So they knew, because in Colorado only a third of the states allowed it, and so they wanted to make sure it got broadened, and that's another issue. Oh, and just one other issue that
yes,
I think
no,
is
please
really,
bring it up.
It's the issue of home growing, and
yeah.
most people, they say, they allow people to grow, to make their own beer at home. With the marijuana, it's such a profitable industry. They allow you to grow 12 pot plants. Colorado they allow you to grow 6 pot plants. You're going to be able to grow 12 pot plants. And this is significant because 12 pot plants, it's like, what's 12 pot plants? 12 pot plants, 1 pot plant will grow to full maturity, 5 feet tall, in 5 months. And so you look at that and say, okay, well, that's a big plant. Well, what does that yield? It yields a pound of marijuana. So what's a pound of marijuana? Well, an ounce of marijuana, and again, the prices vary widely, but between $200 and $400 an ounce. So when you think about it, it's like all of a sudden I can grow 12 of these, and hey, who's going to watch if I grow 14 or 15? You can have mini pot farms to the neighbor to the left, the neighbor to the right, and there's absolutely nothing you can do. There is no ordinance, there's no waiver, there's nothing you can do. Everyone can grow pot at their home, up to 12 pot plants. And those are the people that aren't going to be testing for IDs.
And there's no tax on those either.
And no tax.
So let's talk about the revenue, but before we leave the homegrown, I want people to understand, you mentioned that neighbors to the right, neighbors to the left, they can't do anything about that. And there's no restriction about location relative to schools or where children congregate or playing fields. There's no restriction.
Yeah, home grow is totally, there is nothing there. I think there's a few blocks away from a school if you have a business. Like, so if you have a retail outlet. Right. But as a home grow, there is no limitations to it. Right. And so that's a significant point that you're going to see people realizing, geez, this is a profitable industry. They say that it gets rid of the black market. Absolutely not.
No,
that is precisely why the black market will flourish, because people can grow pot totally legally and under the guise of legality, and then guess what? They're going to go to Rhode Island. Right. They're going to go to New Hampshire. They're going to go to Maine, New York, New Jersey, and they're going to sell their wares out into these different areas because it's such a profitable industry.
And we're seeing that in Colorado. So I found it very interesting that the first state had no homegrown because, of course, it was easier to get it on the ballot without that risk. So now we're increasing the homegrown per state, and now Massachusetts has the highest level of homegrown, which has prompted, for example, and I know you're aware of this, the governor of Vermont, as one example, who was very much in favor of legalization, now is completely against it, particularly because of the type of legislation that's in our ballot question.
And it's an excellent point. The governor of Vermont is in favor of legalization, but not this ballot
Not
question.
this ballot
He
question.
believes this ballot question goes way too far.
Yep.
It's a bad
Right.
pot bill, as he
Right,
calls it,
right.
because it allows for edibles. It allows for commercialization. He doesn't want that. He just
Right.
wants it just to allow people to do whatever they want. So that's a significant point. And so here's someone that's a proponent of legalization saying, "Oh, but not this." And that's
Right,
the important thing.
right,
People
right.
understand we're voting on a ballot question, a piece of legislation.
Right.
We're not voting on marijuana, yes or no. We're voting on a ballot question written for the industry, by the industry.
That cannot be changed once we vote in. The complexity of it is profound. The homegrown, I think, is a significant issue. One last thing on the homegrown, and it's just anecdotal, but a very smart young person here in town said, do you think if it becomes decriminalized that people who have made their living are going to suddenly say, I'm going to go work at Costco? They're going to continue to have that avenue of their income, which will be made even easiher for them.
Of course, because there's no risk. There's no
Right,
risk of.
there's no risk.
And again, it's already decriminalized, so
Right.
it's not like it's really. Marijuana. If you have under an ounce of marijuana, you get a $100 civil penalty.
Which they can't enforce because there's no way to do it.
Exactly.
What we've discovered is that's not been
It's
enforced.
totally unenforceable.
Yeah.
So it's there. If they need it for medical purposes, they can get it for medical
Exactly.
purposes.
A lot of it.
So, and I'm not suggesting that there isn't people that need the cannabinoids inside
Exactly,
of the marijuana
exactly.
plant, and for that extent. But this is a totally different industry, and this
Right.
is so. What you're seeing is a lot of venture capital coming in from across the country to come in and have their their legalization here on the East Coast and have it expand from here.
Absolutely.
And I don't know that Massachusetts, we're ready to see advertisements at the Patriots game, billboards driving down the highway with big marijuana leaves. I don't think people understand the significance of it. You can't stop that,
Right.
because they have freedom, First Amendment rights.
Right. And I think something that really struck me a couple of days ago, I was talking to a colleague in Boston about this, is that, this, I mean, you're from a big city, you're from Plymouth, but Massachusetts is primarily, I know because I'm one of the smaller towns, we are one of the smaller towns, is primarily small towns and small cities. So the impact on the communities is going to be profound. And that gets to the tax revenue. If you want to, we can touch on that just a little bit. I find it fascinating, and that as these ballot questions have emerged in the country, as you say, they're written for and by the industry. They change to the point of benefiting the industry, but not really looking at the social costs for communities and states. And so Massachusetts will maximum receive 10% revenue from taxes. You and I know that the estimates are that won't even cover the operational regulatory piece. Talk about how that could impact that pie at Beacon Hill, that already towns like Sandwich, and this, we're in your district, many towns this size don't get a fair share when it comes to the formulas out of there.
Less than a fair share.
Less than a fair share. Talk how that's going to impact us.
Well, first of all, I want to hit the issue that you talked about, was regulatory piece. What people don't understand is that there is no federal government to help with the
That's
EPA, to help with the FDA, or any of it, because at the federal level, this is an illegal substance. It is illegal. So who is ever growing it, what kind of pesticides, what kind of herbicides are you using when you grow this product that's going to be inhaled into people's lungs?
Or as the industry itself, not to interrupt you, but I was pleased to see this come out. Most of the big commercial grows will have to be inside, which creates a lot of energy and water issues. Go ahead.
That's another aspect of it. But again, the regulatory, when I went to Colorado, met with the Commissioner of Agriculture. He says between 85 and 90% of his job today, what used to be going out to farms, making sure that the crops, everything is safe, is dealing with the marijuana industry now. That's all he does, because he has to go in to make sure what type of regulatory process do you need to make sure that these products that are being consumed are safe for ingestion. For example, think about it. You have your lawn sprayed by True Green, Camelon, or whatever like that. It's like, I mean,
I
it
don't.
tells you, well, but people do. But I'm just saying, they do that, right?
Right.
It tells you not to walk on it.
Right.
It's a fertilizer. It grows the product. Oh, how many people, especially these home growers, are going to be out there growing product that people are going to be ingesting into their system that we have no idea? So we have to regulate that. That costs money. We have to regulate the financial industry, because you can't use credit cards, you can't use the banking system, so it all has to be cash.
Yeah.
So you need an entire regulatory process for that. You need a regulatory process to educate people about the ills of this particular new substance that we're opening up. And again, we always know that marijuana has been there, but when you commercialize and market it, it's going to be even more so. It's just common sense, right? And so we have to do that. So the 3.75% excise tax that they allow for this marijuana initiative, just so you know, in Colorado, it's 25% marijuana tax and whatever they put it, I think they call it, but 25% in Colorado. In Washington State, it's 37%, and we're going to have 3.75%.
Yeah. We
We are going to, of course, they feel nice because they allow us to put a sales tax on it, which is, frankly, you put a sales tax on everything.
Right.
So with that being said, the revenue is far smaller than in Colorado and in Washington State. And this hasn't been a big boondoggle for Colorado financially.
Right.
And it's even less, it's going to cost the Commonwealth money to regulate. When it costs the Commonwealth money to regulate, they have to take it away from local aid.
Yeah.
They have to take it away from public safety. They have to take it away from the environment. And that's a concern.
That's a real concern, because we also know, I'm very involved in prevention, that on every dollar spent for substance abuse prevention, we're only spending 1% to 2% on education and prevention. So if we're not spending enough money to turn the addiction crisis around, and we're losing money with this business proposition, where does that leave us?
I know. It is. There's so many unanswered questions, and I guess there could be a conversation about if you want to do it like the governor of Vermont wants to do it, to have that conversation, but don't do it under the guise of that's the conversation we're having, when this is really a ballot question that is set up to open up this entirely new industry that a few will make millions and millions, if not billions of dollars on. And I think that's of a legitimate concern for people to think about when you vote. Think about that. Think about, I don't have a problem with some guy smoking pot in his basement. None of us do.
Right.
But the reality is do you want to drive down the center of Sandwich and historic Sandwich and have somebody open up a business and with a big pot shop on it? That's not that's not the environment I think that people want to see in Sandwich.
Right.
We don't want people coming to Cape Cod to come and get high. We want
Right.
people to come to Cape Cod to enjoy our beaches, enjoy our tours, our tourist destination, but not as a destination for people to come and use illicit drugs.
And we've seen the outcome of that in places like Colorado, the homelessness increase, et cetera, et cetera. I thought it was very bold of the Cape Cod Chamber to take a stand on this for that very reason. They see the economic and the environmental impact, and it's very important. Senator DiMacedo, thank you for being here today. Enjoyed so much.
Well, thank you for having me, and I appreciate your interest as well. This has been so helpful to get the grassroots educated on this, because, as you know, this is all about education. This is about learning,
Yeah.
and I really encourage the people that are watching to spend time, listen to, and understand what this actually is. That this is, you're the legislator now. Everyone, I always tell
Yep.
people, you're the legislator today, and you want to do a thorough job when you're making a decision on something as big as this. Understand what's in there before you vote. And if you do, I believe you'll come to the clear question that vote no on 4.
I thank you again for all you shared with us today. Thank you for watching, and you can contact Senator DiMacedo if you'd like to ask any other questions, because he is rather an expert on this. Thanks, it's Linnell Grunman. I'll talk to you next time.